warning, no halt, no anything, just flat out shot them. They shot their own people, killed them. Oh my God, the families of the 139 remaining hostages are enraged. They are gathering around Benjamin Netanyahu, screaming for him to stop this war and get their people out. Other hostages are coming out and they're starting to tell the stories. They said, we didn't fear Hamas while we were being held. We feared Israel. Israel was the one killing us. Israel, we feared the bombs. Netanyahu is in horrific trouble. So he has to appease his base, because his base is starting to feel a little exposed here. And so this is what the Mossad thing is. I think it's a public PR campaign because it's stupid as hell. If I were a Mossad assassin, I'd quit right now. I would just say, what the hell are you doing telling the world that I'm going to run around trying to kill Hamas people? Are you stupid? And the answer is yes. So I sort of doubt that there's Hamas or Mossad hit teams in Qatar trying to hunt down and kill Hamas officials there. First of all, you're going to be in Qatar. That means that the Qataris, they own that turf. How do you get in? How do you get out? And now that you've highlighted yourself, they're going to be looking for every Irishman, Canadian, and whatever, German businessman, because, Mossad, there's only certain number of ways you can infiltrate people into places covertly, and you pretty much used them all. Everybody knows whose passports you've stolen, whose passports you forge, what covers you use. And so now, and plus, remember, this is a recently announced initiative. And so unless Mossad has a cell already in place in Qatar that's been doing things for, say, 10 years, just shining shoes and selling books and waiting for the phone call to come to go kill people, they've got to bring those assets in. And the Qataris are going to be all over that. So I personally believe that this was more for domestic political consumption, and the politics of it. Again, to put out a bounty like that is to create mistrust. It's not as though the Israelis expect any Gazan to say, hey, I know what you are, is right over here, pay up, buddy. Because the moment you pay up, they're dead. They're going to die. They receive the money. They don't even get to spin it before boom, 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 you go down. So no Gazan's going to turn in the guy. But what you've done now is you create doubt, because now people are going to be going, or at least the Israelis want them to create doubt, going, who's going to turn in whom? Can I trust you? Are you going to get the money? Who's going to get the money? And that's the whole idea. The CIA used this tactic against the Palestinian, various Palestinian groups in the 1980s, where they basically planted the seed of doubt within that there was an informer. And basically, at the end of the day, what happened is that group went into sort of a Stalinistic rage and arrested everybody and executed everybody and self-destructed. It was the easiest victory the CIA has ever had, because they didn't have to do anything. They just said, don't trust these people and insert the seeds, and they let it happen. So I think that's what the Israelis are trying to do right now, is to create doubt within the ranks of Hamas, within the Gazan population. But it ain't going to work, because these people are as united as they've ever been. Hamas is more popular today than they've ever been. Recent poll shows that Hamas would easily win over 70% of the vote throughout all of the Palestinian territories if there was an election today. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
All right, we have a voicemail message from a woman named Esther.
Hello. My question is, do you expect that Western European countries will try to rebuild their relationship with Russia when Ukraine surrenders? And also, what would you advise governments in Western Europe to do to regain Russia's trust? Thank you.
That's a good question. Let's go with the first part. I think they have to. They have no choice. The European economy is going to need to get energy quickly. And it has to be affordable. They can't go around paying these 30%, 40%, 50% premiums on natural gas, enriching the United States while they bankrupt their their own economies. And it's going to happen sooner rather than later. You're already seeing a division in Europe, and it's going to become the haves and the have-nots. The nations that will continue an energy relationship with Russia will succeed, and the nations that walk away from this will fail. And so I think right off the bat, that's going to be the other thing is once this war ends, all the garbage that's being spouted by Biden and what I call the Putin whispers about Russia's nefarious intent against NATO is going to be proven false. Once this war ends and they see that Russia is, again, I just advise people to listen to Putin. He sort of tells, the guy telegraphs exactly what Russia is going to do. He laid it all out there in the question and answer. You just got to be patient enough to wade through, 3 hours, 45 minutes of questions. And you gain a lot of insights into how he works, how the Russian government works, what their priorities are, and how they go about prioritizing things. The Russian military is on what they call a victory budget for the next 3 years. All right. Now, does that victory budget mean that they think the war is going to continue for 3 more years? No, I think Russia's made it clear they think the war is going to end in 2024. But Russia still has to respond to the expansion of NATO. That means Finland. They have 60,000 troops they have to put up in a new military district outside of St. Petersburg. That costs money. It takes time. 3-year victory budget. The West has said that they're going to fool around up in the Arctic. Russia has to respond. Russia has to build up military force to do that. The Japanese are playing games in the Kuril Islands. Russia has to respond. But Russia's responding defensively. They're not responding offensively. So after they take Ukraine, Russia's going to go into a mode that says we have to have sufficient force to receive any attack, repel any attack, and carry out whatever counteroffensive actions are necessary to eliminate the threat. But it was interesting. I was talking to a very senior Russian a little while ago, and I talked about war with NATO, and I was babbling on about well, it's going to be conventional, and they're going to do it. And he said, Scott, you don't understand. The moment we go to war against NATO, we just assume it's going nuclear. And so we're going to hit them first with the missiles. And I'm like, well, you're not even going to play on the ground? There's not even be a little bit of, let's see who's better conventionally? Said, no. But that's predicated on a NATO attack. He says, once NATO attacks us, we have to assume that they've made the decision that they're going to see it through, that they're seeking the strategic defeat of Russia. And so once they attack us, we assume the worst and we just take them all out. And what shall be, shall be. Which tells me that Russia's not looking to attack anybody. So all this nonsense that Joe Biden's out there, we have to defeat him in Ukraine or else my uncle and my father, who was resurrected apparently and lives in a kibbutz near Gaza, even though he died in 2002. I'm sorry, I'm making fun of a senile old man, and I'm not supposed to do that. But the point is, it's just fantasy, because that whole scenario he painted is predicated on Russia attacking Poland, Russia attacking the Baltics. Russia is not going to do that. Russia is going to win the war in Ukraine. They're going to win decisively. It will be not a good outcome for Ukraine, no matter what. But Russia will not attack NATO. They're not going in that direction. And therefore, once that becomes obvious, I think you're going to see the Europeans now in a quandary. Do we bankrupt our already bankrupt economies even more by trying to build a military capable of defeating Russia? It isn't going to happen, guys. Or do we build a military that is what is expected of in terms of self-defense, legitimate self-defense, but we can even keep it mitigated even more by ensuring that the Russians aren't viewing us as the enemy? A new European security framework. Where have we heard that before? December 2021, Russia put forward draft treaties to the United States and to NATO outlining their vision of a new European security framework. So the U.S. Congress ought to prevent U.S. Good luck. Let's see if it happens. I don't. I think that might not pass constitutional muster, but we have to see. The president is the executive. I think the Constitution gives him exclusive purview over executive decisions. So, it's interesting that Congress wants to do that. But this, so Russia isn't going to attack. Europe will be looking for better relations. It may take a couple years. Now, what can Europe do to win back Russia's trust? Nothing. Russia's never going to trust you again, not for a long time, not in this generation, not afterwards. But just because Russia doesn't trust you doesn't mean that you can't have good relations. But you've ruined it. Why would Russia ever trust Germany again, or France, or anybody in Europe? Why? Listen to Father Vladimir. Father Vladimir said, if I had to go back to 2000, what advice would I give myself? And he said, don't be so naive about your so-called partners. Russia will never view the West the same. Not until there's a radical transformation of who we are and what we are, because we can't be trusted. We are liars. We lie about everything. And I mean literally everything. It shames me how much we lie. We can't tell the truth about anything. Nothing. We lie. Again, let's just look at the lies. CNN publishes a report that says that the Russians, of the 360,000 Russian troops that were in the special military operation theater of operations at the beginning of the war, 317,000 of them, or 87%, have been killed or wounded. And it's an intelligence report that was written just for Congress at this time. But what's cool about it is it was then declassified and leaked to CNN. Now, one of the things you do in the intelligence business is you look at past patterns of behavior, because that sort of dictates what's going on now, especially if the same people are involved. It wasn't too long ago, we'll call it the spring of 2022, that the head of the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, oh gosh, we'll even call it Jake Sullivan, the head of the National Security Council, admitted, they said, we declassify intelligence so it can be released to the mainstream media, and they named CNN as one such outlet. That's what's pretty cool about it, because they're that stupid. They named CNN as one such outlet so that they can manipulate public opinion. Okay, so, and even if they know it's wrong, that was the beauty of it. Even if we know it's wrong, we're going to declassify it and release it just because this is information warfare. So look at the timing of this, because timing's important. Congress is being pressured by Joe Biden to release $60 billion worth of money to Ukraine. Congress doesn't want to. One of the main reasons why Congress doesn't want to is that, as Lindsey Graham, who has always been in favor of giving Ukraine money, and he's the guy that said it's the best investment we got because we're killing Russians and it's not costing us any bodies. We just give money to the Ukrainians and they fight to the last Ukrainian. Isn't life nice? But now he's saying I can't go home to South Carolina and tell my constituents that I care more about Ukraine's security than I care about our security. And he's talking about the southern border. He's talking about immigration policy. So the Republicans have linked, immigration policy reform and actual funding of the wall and all the technologies associated with protecting the border, more agents, the whole thing. They said, you got to fund this before we talk about Ukraine money. But remember, Congress is, I think we call it bicameral. I might be wrong on that one, but I think that means two houses. There's the upper house, the Senate, and the lower house, the House of Representatives. The Senate doesn't get to just do whatever it wants to do. The Senate can come to some sort of compromise position and say, yep, we all agree on reform and we're going to release the money. And the House is going to say pound sand, because the House has some other priorities out there. Mike Johnson came out and said, I'm not against giving Ukraine money, but before we give them $60 billion more on top of the 120 plus billion we've already given, Ukraine's going to have to show us a plan to victory. I mean, what do they plan to do with this? Are they going to go on another counteroffensive? That didn't work. So we need a plan. How do you plan on taking 60 billion and turning it into victory? And oh, by the way, we need accountability. We're not just going to give you money anymore. We need to know how this money is being spent, who's getting the money, why they're getting the money, what are we expecting from the money. We need to account for it. And Ukraine can't meet the first requirement because they don't have a plan besides give me money. And they'll never accept the other one because the whole thing about Ukraine is it's a giant grift. It's a giant embezzlement scheme. It's a kickback scheme. There is no such thing as a clean contract. Every contract includes a kickback. Every contract. Did you see the story about that the actor Trujillo or something? I mean, he plays Scarface and Machete and stuff like that. You know, now we found out a lot more about why Ben Stiller and all these actresses and actors went to Kiev, because the Ukrainian government said, hey, we want you to come to Kiev and do a little PR stunt, meet the president, do all that. And he said, sure, it's a gig. How much are you going to pay me? He's not going over there because he loves the Ukrainians. How much are you going to pay me? They said, pay you $100,000. He said, all right, that's fair. I'll do it. But then they said, but we're going to give you $150,000 and you're going to give me 50 back in cash. And he went, what? No. I don't do that. Danny Trejo. There we go. Thank you, Rock and Roddy. Danny Trejo. He said, no, I don't do that. There's no kickbacks. Well, that's how the Ukrainians work. And that literally is a 33% kickback. I mean, that's a high.
I haven't heard this. Is this just some rumor or is this confirmed?
No. He came out and talked about it. He's straight up saying it. He charged them $100,000 and they said, well, we're going to give you 150, but you got to give us 50 back in cash.
Right.
And he went, that ain't going to happen. So,
wow.
That's, yeah, so that's
when people are used for propaganda like Anakis, and before you said CNN is sometimes fed information that they disseminate as propaganda in order to influence public opinion. Is there any chance that you are used in that same way? Like, for example, when you said that senior Russian official told you when Russia will use nuclear weapons, is there a chance that you're being used in that same way?
There's always a chance. I mean, you can put that out there. What I would say is this: my intent is pure. I'm not playing a game.
Right.
All right. I'm also a very experienced analyst, and that experience can either be a sign of just age, or it can be a reflection of that I've actually been doing this for a long time and getting good results. I'll take both. Yeah, I'm old and I've been doing it for a long time.
Isn't doing it for a long time the same thing as a reflection of age?
Not really, because if you've been doing it for 20 years and you started when you're 18, you're only 38.
Oh, okay.
Right. But my point is, I build into everything I do. Trust me, before I open my mouth and repeat something, I do my due diligence. I go out and I fact check and I run the logic on it and all that. So if you haven't learned anything about me in listening to the show, it's that I'm very logical. It doesn't always mean I come up with the right conclusions, but it does show that to get from A to Z, I actually go through all the letters. I don't take any shortcuts. And so I'm not going to sit here and say something about a conversation I had with somebody if I haven't already run the checks on it, the checks and balances. It checked out. Doesn't mean that I can't be being used. That's possible. I've always told people when I speak, never, ever, ever take what I say at face value. Never. Assume that I'm working for the Russians and then receive what I say and then fact check it. Run the logic test yourself. And if through that process, if the end you go, I agree with Scott. Notice what you just said. I agree with Scott because I have tested it and I believe that Scott's telling the truth, as opposed to what Scott said's right, man. Why? Because he said it. No. So yeah, I think I passed the propaganda test. But with the U.S. government, there's no pure intent there. It's deliberately done to misinform the American people. Deliberately done to misinform the American people. They know they're releasing bad intelligence. They're releasing it to the media for the specific purpose of influencing public opinion. And that's not good.
All right, want to take a phone call, Scott?
Sure.
Hey, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector. He has a cold, so be extra nice to him.
My question is regarding Scott last Friday explained us very clearly that Israel maintained nuclear ambiguity to make sure that it's possible for United States to help Israel.
For battalions to make up for the losses that they're suffering in Gaza. But now this fight's turned into an infantry fight, and the Israeli infantry just isn't up to the task. I'm not, I'm an old fat man thousands of miles away from the battlefield, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I could do it any better than the Israelis. When I was younger, I could do it a hell of a lot better, and so could my Marines. These guys aren't very good. Russian people Russian commanders who fought in Mariupol, fought in Bakhmut, are looking at the Israeli tactics that they're using, and they're saying if they took this up against a real army, they'd all be dead. But they're not fighting they're fighting Hamas. It's a different kind of fight, but these aren't very good soldiers. They're not, they don't have the discipline. They can't. How can you be, let's just put it this way. If you're a 23-year-old major, you ain't very good.
You're right.
Okay. Major should be around, 32, 35, so that's a whole nother decade of experience you need to have before you're a major. If you're a 19-year-old sergeant, you ain't very good at all.
When I was I'll say this, in law enforcement, when I became captain, I was 36. And I was the youngest captain in the state of Maryland of all of the, various police departments that the state has. I was the youngest one. I got major at 38. And that was fairly young, right? Because it takes a lot of years just to know, for one thing, all the policies and procedures. What happens if this happens? You can't hold on, let me go get the manual. You have to know, if this happens, notify this person, do this, call this person. People are going to look at you. This happened. What do we do? You have to know that stuff, rote memory, right? You ain't going to learn that in a couple of years. So even in law enforcement, you're not going to find a bunch of captains and majors running around even in their late 20s. Usually it's their late 30s. The guys are going to have some gray starting to show up here before you start seeing those oak leaves and train tracks start to show up on their collar, right? So you can call somebody a major, but when you just stick them out there, and of course, in the rubble, let's be honest, if we're fighting in the rubble and I'm Hamas, I'm looking for oak leaves and stripes. I'm looking for the guy in that kind of environment. I'm looking for the people with rank to shoot first.
Well, you know why they have majors that are 23 years old? Because, look, I got promoted to captain when I was 28 years old. Okay, one thing I learned to become a captain is that the answer is staff sergeant. First thing, hey, Cap, what about this? Good question. Staff sergeant, hey, Gunny, come here. What's the answer to that question? Because I'm just 28. I may have captain rank, but I don't know. I mean, I was honest enough to say, I don't know. Gunny, staff sergeant, sergeant, corporal, lance corporal, somebody come and help me, please, because I don't know the answer. But that's okay, because I had experienced Marines who would then come in and say, hey, Captain, this is what we think that, and then I would sit there and think about it and come up with an answer. But what's happened with the Israelis, they don't have that. They don't have gunner. They don't have 15-year gunnery sergeants. They don't have 10-year staff sergeants. They got 19-year-old sergeants. So what that means is the tasks that would be assigned to these experienced NCOs in the American system have to be assumed by officers. So they have majors, 23-year-old majors, doing the work of a staff sergeant. It's a totally screwed up system where they're officers. They're saying this is the leadership ethic of the Israelis. No, it ain't. It's called stupidity. It's called a conscript army. It's called what happens when you don't have a professional army. And just keep in mind that the vast majority of these Israelis out there fighting are young kids with no military experience. These aren't guys that have been in the military for 10 years, 15 years, who've been there, done it, got a couple t-shirts. These are guys, this is their first experience, and they're not trained well. They didn't go. I saw a comment in there about a guy saying, I lived at, I was stationed at Fort Hood, but I lived at 29 Palms, or he lived at Fort Ord. He talked about Reforger, the reinforcement of forces in Germany. That's an exercise that we did during the Cold War, where we would literally every year, or sometimes twice a year, fly 10,000 soldiers out to join up with pre-positioned equipment, and within less than 12 hours of landing, they were in the field with their equipment going through combat drills, because that's the way we had to fight with the Soviets coming across the border. You had to land, jump in, and go. Be ready to fight now. And the only way you could do that is by training 24/7. You didn't even become good at Reforger. I would ask this guy to ask me that. Were you good the first time you did Reforger? No. Why? Because it was all new. You're going, Christ, this is difficult. I don't understand what's going on. You only became good at Reforger about the fourth time you did it, when you went, okay, I know what to expect. I can anticipate. My brain's not going to get bogged down. I can boom. And suddenly things are working the way they're supposed to work. That was the whole purpose of it. But 4 Reforgers meant that you were in for, 2, 3, 4 years before you became good at it. Israeli conscripts in for 2.5 years, half of that time spent just getting basic training. They aren't good at anything. They're not good at anything. And I'm just saying that with all seriousness. They suck. They're good at beating up girls, beating up 10-year-old boys, breaking arms, shooting old men, but they're not good at war. They're not good at it all. You can't even be good at tank operator. Think about that. Who's driving the damn Merkava tanks? Guys have been driving for 10 years? No, guys that got straight out of armor school, and now they're in a Merkava tank in one of the most demanding environments in the world. They don't know how to use cover. They don't know anything about what they're doing. They're coming in there scared. Bam, they get hit. Now what do? Where's their infantry support? Did they practice that tactic? Half the people out there that have worked with the American tank infantry team knows what happens the first time you go out there and you try to work with the Bradley and dismounted guys. You screw it up badly. You lose every time. Why? Because the enemy's going to kick your ass, because you don't know what you're doing. But then you take that loss, you come back and you talk about it, and you say, okay, hey, rather than you guys deploying here and getting overextended and me coming in without you here, okay, we're going to come in. Get that guy deployed first. Okay, you got that field of fire. Come in here, boom. Okay, get the fire suppression down. Okay, now move in. Now do this. Now you're thinking tactically. It takes a long time to do that. These Israelis don't think tactically. Plus, they're emotion driven. When your strategic purpose is to inflict pain on the Palestinians, that's what you're doing. These Israelis are more intent on making TikTok videos showing them desecrating mosques, burning schools, embarrassing, humiliating Palestinian women than they are focused on the actual business of war. If you're not, I was told, I'll just leave this. I had a Marine captain once drive me from, I took a ride from Washington, D.C. back to Quantico. As we're driving there, we're talking, and he's like, you're going to be a career Marine. I'm like, yeah, it looks like it. And he's like, okay, hey, what do you see out here? And I'm driving through in this beautiful land of Northern Virginia. And I went, I don't know, some hills, some town. He goes, you ain't a professional warrior yet. He goes, when you look at that, I want you to see, the best route up the hill, where the covering fire position is. I want you to be looking at, cover, concealment. You have to be thinking this every time you go. We told that same thing with firefighters. I was drive through with my firefighters in town. I'd say, what do you see? Oh, street. And I said, no. You have to see single wall construction. You have to see this. You have to look in there and see the car. Are there children's toys out in the front yard? So if you show up, are there going to be kids in that house? Is there evidence of animals? You got to look at this kind of stuff. When you got to think firefighting. Where's the fire hydrant? What's my best approach so I don't block the ladder coming in? Where are the lines? If you're not thinking like that, you're not a professional. As a Marine, I literally, to this day, I look at everything from a perspective of tactical advantage, operational, logistical sustainability, because I was trained that way. These Israelis, they don't think like that. They don't think like that at all. They're not very good at what they do. And Hamas lured them into a trap of their own making, and Hamas is kicking the living snot out of them.
If you got a couple minutes, you got enough for one more subject? Maybe we'll
do
10 minutes. Okay. Let me share two things with you. Let's look at it. Number one, I'm going to do two. Here's the first one. Break-in. Marianne Williamson claims primaries are rigged, accuses 4 states of bias towards Joe Biden. So what we got is Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Massachusetts. Only Biden's name will appear on the ballot. They will not allow anyone. The Democratic Party has decided those 4 states are Joe Biden's. If Garland Nixon, if Scott Ritter, if somebody who's lived in that state the entire life, if they're beloved by everyone and they say, you know what, I think I want to give it a shot. Sorry, Joe Biden's the only person. It's like we hear about those banana republics. Hey, vote for whoever, and they put one name on the ballot. Now, let's do one other. One more article. All right. Republicans threaten to take Joe Biden off the ballot in states they control, right? And why are they doing that? Because of a Colorado ruling that Donald Trump is not permitted to be on the ballot this year. So what we got is a Democratic Party where Biden, let's face it, he's done. We watched him the other day say that 65 years ago on October 7th, 65 years ago, he said this. I saw the video that Hamas attacked Israel. His father, he literally said, my father went back to the kibbutz to look for his family. His Irish Catholic father, who died 20 years ago, apparently was living in a kibbutz. 65 years / days. It was madness. And the Democratic Party has said, in our primaries, you can only vote for this guy. Meanwhile, as far as the Republicans are concerned, Donald Trump, like him, don't like him, it doesn't matter. He has every right. You and I have every right to run. Everybody has every right to run. I'm sorry, if you're a person that wants to vote for Donald Trump, nah, that ain't happening. He ain't on the ballot. To call this a miscarriage of justice is absurd. But it's like I said now, Republicans are saying, and as soon as that happened, I said that we'll take Joe Biden off the ballot in states where they control, which I disagree with all of it, but I predicted that would happen. We now have a Democratic Party that has become, I don't even know what the word for this is, fascism, to say we're going to take people off the ballots, where our own constituents, they can't vote. You want to talk about a banana republic fascist activity? This is about as bad as I've ever seen it. What are your thoughts on this, Scott Ritter?
No, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, it's over for America. We've become a joke, a tragic joke. Democracy is dead. I mean, it works at the local level to an extent, but again, who puts the names on the ballot? Ask yourselves that. I mean, when you go to the poll on election day and you go, okay, here's the name, who put them there? Did you? Or did the Democratic Party pick somebody? Or did the Republican? See, we become so accustomed to, transferring the responsibilities of citizenship to entities that are unelected, and they get to select for us. So when we go to elect, we're going through the process of thinking we're voting and therefore being a good citizen and we have control, but we're just voting for a preordained outcome, one or the other, picked by somebody else that we have no. We're dead as a society. We are done. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in constitutional processes. And it's illegal to advocate for violent overthrow of the Constitution. It's illegal to do that. But when the Constitution no longer works, when it's become a fraud, when it's become a joke, maybe Thomas Jefferson had it right. I'm not going to repeat his words because I don't want people to get in trouble. You guys can look them up. You know what I'm talking about. The Tree of Liberty. We're headed in the wrong direction. And I don't know what it takes to get the American people to wake up, because it's not just about getting Joe Biden out of office. It's not just about putting Donald Trump or keeping Donald Trump out of office, whatever you want. It's about the system. The system is corrupt. The system is broken. The system is the one that fools us into thinking that this is a democratic institution. We are a joke, literal joke. We go around and we interfere in the electoral processes of other nations and say, well, you don't run elections right. We don't run elections right. Man, there is no singular. We have 50 states that do 50 different things with different ways, and within the states, different things. We don't know how to run an election. Why is it that Iran can tell you the same day who won the election with a very accurate vote count? Why can Iran count votes better than we can? Why can't we count votes? What is it about the American system that has it so that on the day of a national election, we have to wait a week until we find out what vote counted? Guys, it's broken. The system's broken. And it leads to, I'm not going to jump here and jump on the bandwagon of a stolen election. All right. I'm not saying, what I'm saying though is it leads to the perception of a problem. If at the end of the night, you don't know what's going on, and then things start happening. Now, people tell you that that's not nefarious and all that, but things start happening, then vote counts start changing. That may be just the process of counting votes. I accept that, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right. And it creates the perception of fraud. And the perception of fraud is more destructive to democracy than real fraud, or as destructive, because people start to lose faith in the system. And then this leads to people accepting at face value. I mean, this is revolution generating stuff. You can only have one name on the ballot. Since when did we allow that as Americans? This is where the Minutemen go in the street and say, hell no, we're changing that. But, Bernie Sanders should have done this back when Hillary Clinton had him kicked off, when he won the damn Democratic primary, but the Democratic National Committee stole it from him to install the Queen. He should have stormed the stage and taken over that process and said, you're all fired. I'm in charge now. My people have spoken. It's democratic process. We got more supporters for me than you do for her. I'm the nominee. The Democratic National Committee is fired. The people have now taken over. Wow. That would have been a revolution. That would have been cool. At some point in time, we have to stop playing sheep, literally. The thing about sheep is, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. You're out there.
Seriously, with respect, I, like everybody else, I think shudders at the death and destruction that took place. I wish it had never happened. But you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind, and Israel is reaping the whirlwind right now as we speak. It's tragic, but tragically, it's necessary.
What do you say, Scott, to those who doubt the scale of the negligence that appears to have been involved in all of this being planned? It clearly was planned. The build-up to it must have been long in the making. And yet this most heavily surveyed patch of earth in the world, all this was taking shape and then executed with quite spectacular levels of military success, however ghastly.
Look, there's no doubt that Hamas has pulled off, and this will be studied for years. Again, military professionals have to put aside politics and study military events with a professional eye. And what Hamas did yesterday is one of the most remarkable military feats in modern history. First of all, to be able to plan this without being detected by the Israelis is, as you indicate, almost miraculous. Now, I have an answer as to how this came about. I actually have just written an article. It'll come out in Consortium News later this afternoon that addresses this issue. But I think this, Winston Churchill once famously said that he quipped about the War Office that they are always fighting the last war, never the next war. Israel is guilty of that in my mind. They are fighting 2021, Operation, I forget whatever, they named so many things, Wall Guardian or Guardian on Walls or something like that.
Been so many of them, yeah.
But Israel openly bragged at the end of this conflict, which they claim to have won, and yet Hamas still exists. They said this was the first artificial intelligence war. That you mentioned it. It's the most heavily surveilled piece of terrain in the world. Every 10 minutes, every meter of Gaza is photographed by Israel. And that data, those images go into a giant computer database. They collect every cell phone conversation, every text message, any email messaging. They have total control. They have human spies on the ground. And Israel bragged about this right afterwards in 2022. The first artificial intelligence battle, we had total domination of the information spectrum, and we were able to use artificial intelligence to predict outcomes, meaning that it wasn't a human being now that is telling Israel what to do. It is a computer algorithm put together by Israeli intelligence, and the Israelis bragged about this. And I will say this about Hamas and about the Palestinians and about Hezbollah. They aren't stupid. These are some of the smartest people on the planet, and they are survivors. And as soon as they heard that Israel had turned over the thinking process to a computer, I believe they sat there and they gamed the system. And they sat there and they created a whole bunch of artificial information that lulled the computer into a false sense of complacency. And because the Israelis had yielded their thinking ability to a computer, they went into Yom Kippur mode. And I don't mean this year, I mean 1973, where once again, all the information was there that an attack was going to take place. Hamas said an attack was going to take place. This is not a secret. Hamas has been saying over and over and over again, this is coming. We are going to do this. We will avenge the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So any thinking person, any rational person would have said, we need to prepare for this. But because Israel yielded its thought process to a computer programmed by people who did not respect Hamas, this intelligence failure took place. That's what I firmly believe.
Now, the whole of the south of Israel was, for a time, out with the control of the government in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. The Palestinian militants, the factions, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, many, many groups, some of which I actually hadn't heard of before. They were all running amok. They were attacking settlements and settlers. They were defeating Israeli forces that they found. They were capturing Israeli police stations, military bases, prisons even. Why did it take Israel so long to get on top of the situation, even given the caveats that you've just made about how they missed it coming in the first place?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, we'll never know until the Israelis do an honest to goodness, form a commission to do a politically neutral autopsy on what happened here. But I can speculate, and I just want everybody to understand that that's exactly what's happening right now is speculation. Israel has been a fundamentally broken state in terms of domestic politics for some time now, ever since Bibi Netanyahu returned as prime minister. His corruption followed him, his attempt to shield himself from prosecution by taking over the court system so that he and he alone can appoint judges that are favorable to his position has divided this nation, the nation of Israel, like never before. Prior to the Hamas attack, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets on a regular basis to protest Benjamin Netanyahu. Thousands of Israeli reservists, the very reservists who are being called up now, said they will not serve an Israel that has a Bibi Netanyahu who violates the basic fundamentals of law there. So Israel was a divided nation. The military also, I believe, has just taken a unique stance regarding modern warfare. Look, there are many Russians right now who have learned the hard lessons of war over the course of the past 600 plus days in Ukraine, who are looking at the imagery of the Israeli military response saying these are the most amateurish people we have ever seen in our lives. Their tactics, their approach, the timid nature of these soldiers is shocking. I think the Israeli army has lost the ability to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower and maneuver. They are so casualty averse that they've created a whole unit based upon unique technologies to let robots do the fighting for them. They let computers do the thinking for them. The last thing they want to do is put one of their soldiers on the ground against somebody who is trained and capable of killing them. Very good at beating up women, beating up children, beating up villagers, beating up old men, old women, but they're not very good at fighting people who stand up and fight back. And let's be clear here, the Hamas people who are fighting right now, these are lightly armed people with what their courage is cannot be doubted, but their skill set is limited. These are people who have not had the advantages of the military training and technology that the Israelis had, and yet they're fighting them still today, as we speak, outside of the Gaza Strip, in Israeli territory. They hold 30% of the territory that they captured on day one, and they are fighting. The Israelis can't beat them yet. They will beat them. There's no doubt about that. But Israel has forgot how to fight. They have forgot, because Yom Kippur 1973 was so bloody for them. Their experience in Lebanon was so bloody for them that they said, never again, we won't do that kind of fighting. Unfortunately, when you raise the level of hatred in a captive population, such as the Palestinians in Gaza, and those people decide to rise up, you are going to have to fight. There's a lot of incompetence going on in Israel right now. There's tremendous amount of military incompetence. The people I feel sorry for, to be honest, I mean, I'm just being frank here, are the Israelis who lived in the South. Not because of, there's a political question of should they be there, et cetera, et cetera. But these are people who believe the Israeli government when the Israeli government said, we will keep you safe. You can go to sleep at night. You will be safe. We will be there for you. If anything happens to you, we will come for you. And they were abandoned by their government, abandoned by their military. They're still abandoned to this day. Shame on the Israeli government. Shame on the Israeli military. There should be mass resignations, but this is all done because the men and women who wear the uniform today, who didn't come to the rescue of these Israelis in their time of need, should be evicted from their positions.
If Israel does invade on the ground, and given that there are now a very substantial number, more than there have ever been before, of Israeli prisoners taken in this Al-Aqsa operation, Al-Aqsa flood, there are real problems about a ground invasion that imperils we now know many Americans are amongst those who have been taken prisoner. These prisoners, hostages, will be held in exchange, hoping to exchange them for the 5,000 plus political prisoners in Israeli jails. So a ground invasion is fraught with that difficulty of harming their own people, but also the risk of bringing Hezbollah into the conflict, and thus the possibility of a very big war, two-sided war, indeed. So do you think they are going to go in? And if so, how will that work out?
Israel conducted a major military exercise earlier this year that tested this very scenario. What would happen if an uprising in the West Bank, uprising in Gaza, Hezbollah intervenes in the north, Iran intervenes? What would Israel do? And they did this major exercise, and it turned out that Israel lost. Israel can't win that war. So Bibi Netanyahu knows this. He was the prime minister when this exercise was held. His senior military officers know this. And so I have to believe that they're not suicidal. And now the question they are probably asking themselves is Hezbollah bluffing? Will Hezbollah really commit to this fight? Or is this just a bluff, and should we call Hezbollah's bluff? Because there's a tremendous amount of political pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu now to be seen as doing something decisive to bring this Hamas issue to an end. And that requires a major military move into Gaza, which I will tell you right now, Israel will lose. Will lose. Because the Israeli army can't suffer casualties. Going into urban warfare, if you've learned anything from Mariupol, if you've learned anything from Bakhmut, these horrible names that have come out, and I say horrible because of the death and destruction that took place in the the fighting for these places. Gaza will become like that and worse. The Israelis will suffer losses like they can't even imagine, greater than the Yom Kippur War in its totality. And this is politically unacceptable for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli people. So I can't tell you what they're going to do. What I can say is that if they go into Gaza, they will have to stop their operation almost immediately, because every force there in Gaza will be needed in northern Israel. Because when Hezbollah comes in, they will make what Hamas did the other day look like child's play. The entire north will fall. Haifa could be put at risk. Hezbollah will come in a very serious fashion. Their missiles, their rockets are not these bottle rockets launched by the Hamas. And I'm being a little facetious here, but those are, because you're there to do or die. I mean, one of the great powers that a commissioned officer had is to say, platoon up, advance, and you had to. Into the fire, die, if you were ordered to do so by now. Now, fortunately, we had Marine officers who were smart enough to go, hey, everybody's going to die. We're going to come up with a different way of doing this. But the bottom line is you had to obey the lawful orders given to you without question, if they're lawful, and without hesitation, because to hesitate in the face of a determined enemy means you die. So it requires a mindset. The Marine recruiters in the 1980s really liked athletes. They really liked guys with team. They were attracted to guys and gals that who played team sports, who knew how to operate as a team, who knew what it meant to get up in the morning and train, to get physically fit, to be able to balance the competing requirements of sports, organized sports, and the rest of life, to balance that. Those were skill sets that were transferable to the military, team building, etc. Physical fitness is part of your core values, all that. It's a different mindset. Not everybody's programmed to be in the military, but the people that joined in the 1980s, and I would say even the early 1990s, wanted to be there because they believed it reflected who they were and what they were. Today, there's a lot of individuality. The last thing you want in the military is individuality. There's a room for it. You need creativity. You need people to think, but you need conformity. And Americans today aren't conformists. They're anti-conformists. You also need, to be honest, to be a meat-eating murderer, because the military is about one thing and one thing only. It's killing the enemy, killing them far more efficiently than they kill you. And so if you don't have the ability to eat raw meat and lunge into the enemy and slaughter them, to wade into them, if you can't make that part of the essence of who you are, you're not going to do well in the military today. Guys, look at what's happening in Gaza. It's not a woke fest, okay? This isn't guys and gals holding hands, doing TikTok videos and all that. They're getting killed there. The Israeli Defense Force is being slaughtered on that battlefield. Hamas is fighting a hard fight, but they're being killed too. It is blood. Look at what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, the lethality of the modern battlefield. Okay, if you waltz into the Ukrainian-Russian battlefield saying, well, tomorrow we're going to have a briefing on transgendered rights, and we're going to talk about red zone, yellow zone, green zone. Does everybody, boom, you're dead, because you're not thinking about killing the enemy while the enemy's thinking about killing you. So we have the necessity to create the kind of military that our society isn't capable of producing anymore. And one of the problems is that we're trying to mirror our military like society. I just listened to an Air Force Lieutenant General give a speech that talked about how she selects squadron commanders. And she said, yeah, you have to be good at your job. Well, thank you, General.
That'd be nice, yeah.
Commanders should be good at their job. I get it. But if you're not, for instance, she said, I don't know if I'd promote an unmarried officer to be a squadron commander. Because if you don't know about the family, then you don't know about family values. And if you don't have family values and identify with that, then you can't be an effective leader. What the hell are you talking about? The best battalion commanders I had in the Marine Corps were bachelors, because they spent their entire life eating raw meat and learning how to kill people. That's what you want as a military leader. You don't want some, the red light, green light. No, yes, I'm not saying that, look, they weren't insensitive. The best commanders care for their Marines. But there was a time when you couldn't enlist in the Marine Corps if you were married.
because it's not meant to be for married people. You join the Marine Corps, you're going through some hellacious training, then you're going into deployed status and you're focused on doing that. And it wasn't until you got to the rank of corporal that you're deemed to be mature enough to handle marriage. Now we've changed that, but it changed the Marine Corps. Suddenly became a very expensive place because now we had to take care of families, and families impact deployment, impact training. We had Marines that were working their day job. Ladies and gentlemen, the Marine Corps is 24/7, 365 days a week. There ain't no day job. It is your only job. But you have Marines that were working their day job, but because of the demands of their family, had to go get a night job. And so I had Marines showing up at work instead of saying, all right, boss, let's go. They go, I need another cup of coffee because I worked the midnight shift at Staples. You shouldn't be working a midnight shift at Staples. Marine Corps needs you to get your 6 to 8 hours of sleep that night, to be well rested, to come in the morning, to begin the process of doing what Marines are supposed to do. But we have a military today that is just fundamentally broken in terms of the focus of war fighting. We don't have a military that's capable of fighting wars anymore. We have a military that's incapable of sustaining itself because it can't recruit people to join. Why don't people want to join the military today? Because the military is no longer the military. It's no longer something separate. It's something different. It's not about we never promised you a rose garden. It is we're giving you the exact rose garden that grew in your mama's house because we're bringing you into mama's house. You know, we're going to make it as close. We're going to replicate civilian life as close as possible. And the other thing is the emphasis they're putting on this diversity. Again, for America, civilian society, I think diversity is it's a decision that the American people have to collectively make, you know, how they want to go forward. It's a democratic problem that will be solved democratically. That's great. It doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is what the majority of Americans believe. And if the majority of Americans say we're going to head in this direction, hey, and I don't agree with it, then I have to come up with a better way of articulating to get more people to agree with me so that we can alter that. But if I can't, that means I'm in the minority. My rights will be protected, but they go the direction they go. Welcome to America. That's what makes us a great country. But that does not equate to an effective military fighting force. And today we are incapable to produce this force if we're continuously trying to mirror image society. And I think that's one of the big problems with recruiting is people no longer want to fight and die for America. And the people that would want to fight and die for America don't want to join a woke military. I mean, the wokeness is killing the U.S. military.
Gaza. I watched a video the other day. You know, there's Netanyahu is still doing big talk. We're going to cream them. We're going to smush them. We're going to crush them into the ground. We're not going to stop until they drop to their knees and beg us for mercy, right? And then I watch these videos. You know, we talk about training and everything. There's certain things that are more important and bigger than training. I watched this one video. One of the Hamas guys literally has this satchel-like charge. Has like a bag, right? He comes out of this house, tunnel, whatever, and you see big old tanks sitting there pointing in this direction. I guess they're all batting down. They're not looking behind them, obviously. Nobody's apparently looking in the back. This guy looks around. He doesn't appear to have carrying a gun or anything. He's literally carrying like a knapsack. He runs over to the tank. And I'm thinking, nobody's noticing there's a guy running over to him in the rubble. Yeah. He runs alongside of whatchamacallit. He heaves this thing physically, heaves it under the tank, turns around, runs back in unscathed, kablooey. The tank blows up, and then secondary explosions, I guess, from the shells and what have you in the tank, blows the tank to smithereens. And I'm thinking, when you have that kind of motivation, even that guy ain't got to be trained. You just say to that guy says, I want to fight the enemy. Give me something to do. Here, take this. The odds of you surviving ain't real well. That's okay. Point me to the enemy. They're right over there in the tank. I want you to run over to that tank, unguarded, undefended, on foot, leave this thing under it, and then just run back in this tunnel. And the guy does it. And I'm like, that's another thing that's important, that training is great, but motivation. His family's probably been killed. His extended, at that point, he's like, what the hell? Everybody I know has been, you sons of guns are going to pay. Somebody's got to pay, and it's going to be these guys in that tank right there. Your thoughts on the talk of, we're hearing of Netanyahu, we're going to crush him, kill him, destroy him. And then I turn it on and I see that Hezbollah still hitting positions and they're showing video. You can say what you're doing. They got videos. Guys, taking tanks out. I'm not saying every tank is destroyed, but that one didn't work out well. Anyway, your thoughts on this whole rubble fighting and the big talk from Netanyahu and his crew that we're winning, we're going to win, we're going to wipe these people out. Scott.
Well, let's just start with the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu cannot hold a vote amongst his war cabinet because they're all against him. So he's a dictator right now. He's ruling as a dictator. Because when he tries to vote for expanded operations and for this, the war cabinet's like, no, not going to happen. We just had a former chief of staff come out and say that Hamas has defeated the Israeli Defense Force. This is a former chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Force who's come out and said Hamas has won, Israel's lost, and that the greatest threat to Israel today is Netanyahu, and that we need to get rid of him. And you're seeing this over and over again. So understand everything that Netanyahu says is done in a political environment where his only chance of survival is to be this hard-nosed hawk and push for more war. But Israel's not buying into it. His days are numbered. Look, I said from the very beginning that Hamas, they planned and executed the greatest military raid in modern history on October 7th. I know people, oh, murder. No, it was the greatest military raid in modern history. No military force has come up with anything close to this in terms of its audacity, its complexity, and its success. And a key aspect of a military raid is you go out and do what you got to do, and then you fall back in on prepared positions. And that's what Hamas did. They came back to Gaza underground into a tunnel network, 500 kilometers, that was built for one thing and one thing only: repelling Israeli attacks from the air and from the ground. So you got this anthill of tunnels going everywhere that have been designed not only to provide command and control, logistics, sustainability, but offensive capability means tunnels go up to allow the attackers to go out and attack into Israel or elsewhere, and defensive capability to respond to any attack. They're like little cellular structures. If Israel breaks into one, Hamas can seal it off and protect the hive. That's why pumping water in is so stupid, because you pump it in, they go seal it off. That's it. You didn't get anywhere else with that water, did you? Israel doesn't have a solution to that, but then you complicate it by bombing the hell out of this urban environment, this densely packed urban environment above, bringing it collapsing down on the ground. In addition to the videos that you saw of that guy, and I saw that too, and I'm just sitting there going, first thing I'm going is, he's going to die on the second step, because surely the armor in an exposed position has deployed infantry overwatch to prevent just that from happening. So surely there's a sniper team, there's a machine gun team, there's a infantry fire team out there scanning their respective zone, going, oh, there's an idiot, pop, 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 dead. Okay, that has to happen, right? Well, no, it didn't happen, because the Israelis are scared, poorly disciplined, poorly trained, and this is the reality. That merc of a tank may look good, but the guys inside are scared to death. And the reason why they don't have infantry cover is the infantry's scared to death. Why? Not just because some dude's going to come out with a satchel and throw it under a tank. It's that by dropping this structure, you saw the other videos. I mean, that the Hamas guys are looking through a labyrinth of broken structures, getting this one hole, and then they sit there and they got one shot at the tank as it's right there as it comes through. Now, if you're in the tank and you're driving through, you can't see, even if you got infantry overwatch. They're not, they're looking on the surface, but they're not peering right through that single gap to the Hamas guy inside, who has a weapon designed for this, and who sits there and takes the shot, aims, pop, fires, bam, hits the tank over and over and over again. Hamas has studied the terrain, the new terrain, the collapsed terrain. They've picked their vantage points, and they just wait for the Israelis to come in and fill that hole, fire, kill, run, get out of the way, move. Normally, you'd show videos. I mean, unfortunately, everybody does it. When you kill your enemy, you put their bodies out and you lay them out and you go, well, we killed these attackers here. This is how. Israel's not showing any Hamas bodies, are they? When was the last time Israel said, here's all the Hamas guys we've been killing? Because they ain't killing that many Hamas guys. They're killing a lot of Palestinian civilians. They're rounding up men and claiming they're Hamas, even though they're not. They're teachers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're this, but they're not the Hamas fighters. The Hamas fighters, now I'm not saying Hamas isn't losing people. They are. But Israel isn't slaughtering them. And Hamas is adapting to this battlefield where they have freedom of movement below the ground, and they're able to pick their places above the ground and inflict horrific losses on the Israelis. And as the Israelis become more scared, more undisciplined, they're making more mistakes and they're losing more people. The way you survive in warfare is to have your head on a swivel. I mean, you got to be looking this way. You got to have situational awareness. You got to be well trained. You got to
like
have
on a football field. Like on a football field,
absolutely,
right? If you're looking wrong, somebody they can't do it anymore in the NFL. But in the old days, if you're looking the other way and there's a turnover and you didn't realize it, and now you're a blocker, you find yourself somebody's gonna plant themselves right between your. That was the goal, to find somebody looking the other way and just.
The hits I made in college on special teams against guys who weren't looking would have got me permanently evicted from football today but they were clean hits back then. But, situational awareness, and yes, you have to trust your teammates. You have your job to do, and you have to. You can't worry about what's going to happen in this sector. You just have to assume that your teammates doing that job. Well trained. That's gone. The Israelis are not well trained. They're not. It's a reserve force. They're not that good. They're poorly disciplined. These guys, they if you take a look at what they're doing in terms of mocking the Palestinians and so, that's the sign of a poorly disciplined force. Their goals are revenge, but revenge only takes you so far, because revenge works, until you step in the ring with Mike Tyson and then he hits you and you realize that, oh God, this revenge thing ain't so good anymore because I'm getting the crap beat out of me. Hamas is just sitting there beating the living crap out of the Israeli Defense Force. But it's not just Hamas. Hezbollah. Again, Israeli defense personnel speaking to Haaretz, a Israeli newspaper, have said that Hezbollah, it's not just, because Israel likes to say, we're going to, put the fight into southern Lebanon and make Hezbollah pay a price. What the Israelis have said is Hezbollah has taken over operational control of northern Israel, that Hezbollah is dictating the terms of engagement in northern Israel. They are dictating Israeli activity inside northern Israel. And if you think Hamas has tunnels, I'm here to tell you right now that if this fight expands, you're going to see Hezbollah fighters popping up in places in northern Israel nobody's imagined. They're going to be seizing Israeli towns, Israeli villages. They're going to be launching operations on the ground into Haifa. They'll be hitting the Israelis where they ain't. It'll be a completely different war than the one that the Israeli Defense Force has envisioned, and the Israeli Defense Force is recognizing this, and this is why they're telling Netanyahu, do not go to war with Hezbollah. We will get our asses handed to us. That's the fact. The Houthi, there's no solution to the Houthi. I mean, they what they're doing is just stunning. But it's a reflective of the reality of modern warfare, where these minor military forces, when given advanced military technology, can equalize the military equation. The mighty U.S. Navy with the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier battle group can't control the Red Sea passage. The Houthi, and what it means is that we can't control the Strait of Hormuz. You remember when the U.S. said, hey, everybody, don't worry about Iran. We're the U.S. Navy. We're going to come rolling in there, and we're going to guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. Well, guess what the Houthi just proved? That that's a bunch of malarkey. That when Iran wants to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it's shut down permanently. We can't do anything about it because our aircraft carrier will be sunk before it gets there. All of our ships will be sunk before they get there. The Persian Gulf is a giant death trap for the U.S. Navy. That's what modern technology means. And the Houthi just proved that, because the U.S. government, U.S. Navy had to back down from, Lloyd Austin. I forget, was it Prosperity Guardian?
Yeah, right.
Guardian Prosperity or something, Guardian Prosperity, Coalition of the Willing, all coming together. Everybody else went, not so fast. We don't want to be part of this. We don't support what you're doing with Israel and Gaza. So we don't want to be a part of this. Plus, what happens if this expands and Iran come in? Have you thought about the consequences? Of course, America hasn't thought about the consequences. Garland, we can't do anything. Israel's getting beat tactically, operationally, and strategically. Netanyahu's days are numbered. I think that he will be forced out of office in the very near future because he's failing across the board. He hasn't succeeded at anything. You know, a huge embarrassment on October 7th. He was going to be the war leader that led the counterattack. His Israeli Defense Forces being humiliated in Gaza. They're impotent against Hezbollah. They can't do anything against the Houthi. Their economy is in tatters because of, you know, nothing's coming in to the port and Elliot and you know the 70,000 displaced from the north, 20,000 displaced from Gaza. That's 90,000 people in the middle that have to be cared for. No economic activity, no hope in sight. It's over. Israel lost. I mean, there'll be some fighting, screaming, kicking, and dying to go, but Israel can't win. They can't achieve the objective of destroying Hamas politically and militarily. Hamas is emerging from this stronger than it ever was. It literally, militarily, they're humiliating the Israeli Defense Force, humiliating them as we speak. Politically, Hamas is more popular today than it's ever been. If there was an election today amongst the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, Hamas is estimated to win between 71 and 76% of the vote. The Palestinian Authority has no legitimacy anymore, moral legitimacy. Israel thinks that they're going to be able to move forward with the Palestinians without a Hamas presence. Dream on. Hamas has been empowered. They're here. They're not going anywhere. It's Israel that's going to change. Netanyahu will be out. His coalition will crumble, and Israel's going to have to pick a leadership that's going to have to learn to deal with the new reality of the world.
You know, Scott, I think in what we've seen in the last couple of years, you know, power is only power until you use it, then it becomes force. And once you use force, you become exposed. You know, it's like a punch. I always say this: the worst thing you can do oftentimes is throw a punch, because if you miss, you're open. Or if you throw a punch and somebody traps it against you, blocks it, your arm's out here being blocked, throwing a punch, taking that assertive move, you better win. Because if you miss, people will make you pay, right?
Or if you hit and they go,
yeah. And now they know, oh my gosh, they ain't scared of you anymore. So
you didn't knock them out.
You're better off to continue to intimidate and scare people than to act, because then they find out if you're real or not. Here's my point. We've found out more about what modern warfare in the last 2 years. Here's what we know. Missiles rule, right? I don't care what you got. If you can't stop a Kinzhal hypersonic coming in, whatever you got is done. It's doomed. It's finished. What we found out is drones rule. You know what I mean? Every way, shape, or form, people are now using drones. Yep. Men can't concentrate in big groups or they're going to be blown to hell, right? It appears to me that the U.S. Navy is kind of worthless, because you got now the kinds of missiles that we have. Oh, I mean, they say, oh, we blocked this missile, or this missile came at us, right? But if you send a salvo with 30 missiles, you overwhelm them. You know what I mean? So